My guest today defends his Art of War featherweight title for the first time on December 15th against Cristian Lopez. He's the Korean Thunder, Ryan Cafaro. How's it going, Ryan?
Good. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the most important question I can ask you by far. Did you take your ice bath today?
Oh man. I'm actually, as soon as I was going to do it today, and then as soon as we're done this interview, I'm waiting for my wife's dad to get home. So, because he wants to watch me do it, because he doesn't believe I do it for 5 minutes straight. So I have to, I saved it today just to prove him wrong. Because, you got to stick one to the old man from time to time.
So I swear, because of our conversation earlier, I've gotten 6 different ice bath ads today throughout
It,
different
it's
platforms.
not surprising in the least, especially the way that, technology is now, and the way that even if you think about something, all of a sudden it shows up on your feed and it's like, that's creepy.
So,
Yeah.
but for those watching who may not know who you are, may have not seen any of your career yet, mind giving a quick rundown of like some of the fighters you've worked with,
Yeah.
and about who you are as a person.
Yeah. So I started fighting amateur. I made my amateur debut in 2009 as an MMA fighter. I got to, brush elbows with guys like Frankie Edgar early on in my career when I was an amateur. Got to spar him before, things like that. And over the course of time, I worked with guys like, Jonathan Webb, and throughout my own amateur career. And then I went pro in 2013. I made my debut in Bellator. And I lost my pro debut, bounced back after that, had some mixed success, and then have hit a bit of a tear lately. I'm definitely what you would call a bit of a late bloomer. But during the pandemic, I was starting to build my career as a striking coach, because I had come up with Paul Felder. And there was one day in particular where Eddie Alvarez was supposed to train with Mark Henry, and they just had a scheduling clash. So then Eddie asked me on short notice to hold for him, and he liked what I did as a coach. And then he recommended me to Marlon Moraes, who recommended me to Frankie Edgar. And then the rest is history after that. And then since then, I've made multiple trips to Fight Island to corner Caitlin Chukagian, Sarge Eubanks, Zaruka Dashev. I've worked with Ray Borg, Cowboy Cerrone, pretty much like a lot of big names out there. I've definitely had experience training, even if it's like just I held pads for Rashad Evans once, things like that. It's not always like I'm a major player in these people's careers, but I've definitely been around the block and taught a lot of things to people that they definitely enjoy my style of coaching. And you can't really question my I guess my credentials, because the guys that I work with watched me grow and watched me come up in an era where I had coaches that would make a website and just lie about all their credentials, and that's how they got in with guys like Ricardo Almeida and Frankie Edgar. But you can't say that about me, because they saw me as a little amateur and then grow to where I am now as I would consider myself a pretty respected MMA and striking coach.
Couldn't describe yourself better than that, and definitely hits the point of why I wanted to interview you. Particularly, you've been around the block way more times than most people, even in the UFC right now.
Yeah.
So you kind of touched and kind of stole part of my question already, but you started your career back in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
It's now 2023, and you're hitting your 25th bout as a whole, 17th as a pro.
Mm-hmm.
What got you into the sport, and what's kept you keep going now in your 14th year?
Good question. So I remember I was wrestling in high school, and when I started wrestling, I tried it in 6th grade, and I flailed around on the ground and got pinned. And then I worked out once and was like, I'm sore. Like, ew, I don't want to do this. So then I stopped. And then I got bullied a little bit in high school. Everyone gets bullied. But the difference was, for me, I started lifting weights, and then one of my friends was like, "Hey, you're like lifting a lot of weights. You should start wrestling again." And I started wrestling as a sophomore in high school. And then this time, it really, like, the bug bit me, and I was hooked. And I was loving wrestling and just like obsessed about it. All I wanted to do was like be a district champ, and that was like my big goal in my high school career. And then I remember junior year in the summer, I was flipping through my TV, and I hit Spike TV, and Evan Tanner is fighting David Loiseau. And I remember watching it and being like, whoa, what is this? And the fight ended with David Loiseau stopping him with cuts, plural, from guard with elbows. And I remember being like, whatever that is, I'm in. I want to do that. And that's what like definitely got me into wanting to do it. And then I signed up at a Tiger Schulman's gym near me, and I guess I took like the trial month, and I did probably like 35 classes in 30 days or something like that. Like I was obsessed. I couldn't stop going. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. But I guess what sort of built what sort of, I attribute my longevity in this sport to is, I would say, it's sort of a out of necessity. I mean, from a physical standpoint, I take very, very good care of myself. I don't get out of shape in between fights because I'm always preparing someone else for a fight. So I don't really have the privilege of being a slob in between fights. I can't patty the batty and blow up because, most of my training partners that I train are my same weight. So I can't afford to get too big or just get out of shape, because guys like Mark Gray will maul me in the gym. And then I guess the other reason I've been in this game so long is necessity. Like this is all I've done since high school. What the hell else am I supposed to do? Everything in my life revolves around my fighting career. I mean, the house that I bought, I made sure I had a garage so I could build my own gym in it. All of the things I did, I went to college for health promotion and fitness management because I thought that would be helpful for opening a gym in the future. Every major life choice I have made, the number one deciding factor was, will this benefit my MMA career in the long run? So that's why I'm here still.
That explains, you headed to your 15th year next year. And it's always great hearing, especially like I said, we're about the same age. So it's always nice to hear how we got introduced, because it wasn't as easily accessible back then.
No, not at all.
Like, I got into it by finding a VHS of UFC 3.
Right.
And Ken Shamrock was on it, and I was a WWF guy. And I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then what made me a real fan and realizing that it was more than just these old tapes was actually the promoter who you're fighting for next at his house. I watched, was it Gina Carano versus Julie Kedzie?
Oh, man.
Elite XC.
And
from then on, it was like Die Hard from then.
Yeah.
So it's always great to hear, because it's funny hearing the newer generation find it on YouTube.
Right.
Or they see a Connor or a John Jones and so on. So it's always...
it's so mainstream now.
Yeah. So, leading into your opponent, Cristian Lopez, comes with a 7-7 record. Before we talk about him directly, though, I just want to point out that through all your fights, you've only fought a losing fighter twice.
True. Yeah.
One was a late notice.
Yes. I think maybe like Al Jones was like a week's notice or something like that. But yeah, I've never really had I've never really had like the opportunity to pad my record. And I mean, it shows in a positive way and in a negative way, in the sense that, like, if you look at my record, the only guys that I've beaten have really, really good records. Like, for example, if you look at Adley Edwards, I beat him. He was only 2-0 at the time, but he rattled off like 9 in a row after that before he got signed to Bellator and fought Aaron Pico. And then, but on the downside of it, I probably bit off more than I could chew fighting guys like Scott Heckman when he was like 24-8 back when I was only 6-2. But I had momentum going. I had just beat Jared Mercado, who was like 15-4 at the time, or 14-5, and he was a really like solid wrestler. And I thought, if I can beat him, then I can beat a Scott Heckman. And it was a learning curve that honestly was a blessing in disguise, because I thought I was well-rounded enough to be in the UFC back then. And looking back on it, I would have gotten starched in the UFC. I would have gotten mauled. I would have been 0-2 and right out the door. And I feel like now, with the skill set that I have, I feel like I have the maturity, the longevity, and the durability to actually make an impact, as opposed to just being a participant.
And that's, the number one factor, and what most people fuck up on, is they want to just get there.
Right.
And, we've always heard the phrase from every promoter across the country, it's to stay there, not just get there.
Right.
But on to your opponent, 7-7. What have you been able to see from him while preparing? I'm assuming you probably cornered people on cards that he's fought on, because his past like 4 have been at Ring of Combat.
Yeah. So this fight actually came up only 5 weeks out. It was originally supposed to be my prior opponent, who I just beat for the Art of War title, Matt Turnbull's fight. and then he has an injury. So then the promoter, Mike Bickings, asked me, hey, do you want to fight and defend your title on December 15th? And I was just staying ready for anything in case, someone offered me a short notice fight for like Bellator again or for the UFC or PFL. If I was like 21, I would be like, I'm only fighting for UFC. Don't talk to me. But I'm 34 right now. So like while I have lofty goals and aspirations, I am realistic. I will go wherever I can make a full-time living fighting and not have to, work at a gym. So nobody called. And so with him being the only fight that I was offered, I wanted to close out the year with another win and rattle off 3 wins in a year that I came back from my knee surgery. So I accepted the fight. And to answer your question, believe it or not, I was supposed to corner my friend Lenny Rufati against Cristian Lopez. And get this, fight day, they canceled the fight 2 hours before because Lenny's COVID test had the wrong year written on it by the doctor. The doctor wrote 2021 or 2020 instead of 2021 or 2022. And they said, too late, fight's canceled over a 1 or a 2 or a 0. It was insane. It was the most ridiculous thing. And it frustrates me because it's things like that happen in Jersey and PA, which is like, in my opinion, why we don't have as many visits from top tier organizations like the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, we were supposed to get a Philly UFC card, and they enacted a mask mandate a week prior, and it canceled the entire deal because they were not coming to an area where they could be just in limbo of what was going to happen.
Right. No self-respecting UFC fan wanted to wear a mask at that event.
Yeah. And you kind of led into the next one. At 34, if I was in your shoes, we don't really have much options at our age.
Right.
Where we're at. What are your goals currently? I know after the ACL surgery, it was like one last push. What are your goals?
Yeah. So, I mean, like right after the pandemic stole another year or two from my prime, because all these guys were getting opportunities to fight only in the UFC, and then when CFFC started rolling out, to be honest, I was just not getting any real I felt personally I needed like some sort of bounce back fight, and I needed a fight that made sense for my career trajectory. And I feel like the only things I was being offered was like elite level guys who were on like winning tears. And at that point in my career, like you saw earlier, I posted today, I was on a 1-3 skid, and it was just not in the good place for me to develop and to bounce back. And Mike Bickings gave me the opportunity to find me an opponent. But that being said, the opponent he found was Hassan Abdullah, who at the time was no slouch by any means in the imagination. And from my recollection, he had actually gotten the better of me when we had sparred years before. So like, I was personally scared of that fight. I was like, I don't want to fight this guy because we have a history. But when in reality, I was like, I might lose to him and then I'm really done. So I ultimately had to just make the decision to take the fight and trust my coaches because they were like, you can win this fight. And I did. And then after that, I won. And now I've been on a bit of a tear. And then I tear my ACL and I'm out another year. So it's like, I feel like in reality, I'm actually like 31 as opposed to 34. How would you say? I'm like an older model car with no mileage. That like, there's still, you can put a lot of wear and tear on these treads. Like I've told multiple people this, I've never been knocked out ever, never in sparring, never in a fight. And aside from that catastrophic injury and a neck injury, I'm pretty much fresh. I don't have like a lot of lingering health issues. I'm very healthy. But my goal at this point is to just make fighting a full-time thing in a league where I deserve to get paid, because I am a very, very exciting fighter. None of my fights have ever been boring as far as I'm concerned. The one fight that I would consider was boring during my like 1-3 skid, I ended up getting kicked in the head and having 13 stitches. And then I ended up guillotining him in what my friend Frank Wells calls the most time-sensitive guillotine of all time. And if you go back and you watch my fight against Mike Lawrence for CFFC, you can actually see that fight. It was a very, very, I get kicked in the head, he slips and falls, and then I catch him in a guillotine. And if I didn't, I lost that fight 100%. And so the point I'm trying to make is that my goal is to fight in a top tier promotion where I can fight full time and get paid for it.
With the PFL, I mean, that's a great opportunity there. They're not as like Dana's like no doesn't want to sign anyone over 30 unless
Right.
you're like a heavyweight because he just signed like a 35-year-old, 36-year-old last week at
Heavyweight
heavyweight.
privilege.
I mean, if you want to get bulky, I don't know how the hell it's going to work out on your end, but
I would not pass USADA if I went up to heavy.
but
That I can get.
and with your extensive knowledge, like you kind of hit on it, like you've done the work already to kind of prepare you for the post career. A lot of these guys have to learn that while in the career. Like your friend Sarge Eubanks, like she put the work in like during the career to prepare herself for after.
Right.
And she's doing phenomenal now. Like if anyone looked at her current situation, it's pretty sweet for someone who took a lot of heat from like MMA Twitter.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, and it's an opportunity involving my friend Sajar. People can read a headline and not know the exact story behind things that go on. That like she can't disclose because she's in a legal battle and things like that. And I would just, all I can say as her friend is that if people knew what I knew about her situation and the accusations that were being thrown at her and the actual reality of the situation, everyone on Twitter owes her a fucking apology, as far as I'm concerned. Every single one of them, especially some of like the slanderous things that have been said. These are things that, as far as I'm concerned, you should pull an Ian Gary and you should sue him for talking like that. But and yeah, like I guess to touch back on your original question, yeah, my career is pretty much set for after I'm done fighting. I know exactly what I want to do, exactly how I want to do it. All my students who fight under me that I built when I was rehabbing my knee, which kept me sane. They're like, hey, whenever you're ready to roll and open your own gym full time, like we're ready to rock and help you. So I have the team, I have the protocol, I have all the, the blueprint for how I want to run things. And I'm around phenomenal people with phenomenal gyms, guys like Bill Algio, who runs his own school and fights and is he's a great inspiration to me in terms of what I want to do in the long run. And then there are other guys that are inspiring to me too, like Mike Malott from Alpha Male, who also fights in Canada, and he's an elite level coach and an elite level fighter at the same time. So it's guys like that I look up to a lot.
That's great to hear. And then just to kind of wrap back full circle back again, next Friday you're in a fight.
Yes,
at Live Casino. I believe it's sold out. I know they usually sell Live Casino tickets still available on your end.
I still have tickets, but for the most part, it's sold out. The main event is John Garbarino, and he brings the most tickets I've ever seen on the regional circuit. Oh, but to answer your question about my opponent, what have I seen on him? I've watched tape on him. He's very gritty. I don't think he's particularly very, very skilled in any area. I think he's definitely more of a striker, and he's a bit of an unorthodox counter striker from southpaw. He moves a certain way and does certain things that I feel like the average southpaw doesn't do. One thing I'll just say out in the open is that most southpaws try to dominate the foot position and will circle to their right. And it seems like when he disengages, he always disengages out and circles to his left, which is a little bit strange, but to his credit, he's so long and lanky that he does a great job of maintaining space. And the fights that he has lost, like his last fight in Ring of Combat when he fought the really, really tough Greco-Roman wrestler guy, he managed to get up from being mounted 3 times with a tricky little escape that me and Sarge affectionately call it the hot girl escape, because he essentially is mounted, throws his legs over the guy's chest, and then sneaks out the back. And it's definitely an unorthodox style, but you can't discredit his toughness. And honestly, for me, sometimes fighting a guy like a Cristian Lopez is scarier than fighting a guy with a strong winning record, because then if you lose to this guy, it's like you lost to the 500 fighter. You lost to the guy that you were supposed to beat. And I've always put a lot of pressure on myself going into fights. And I think in the past that has messed with my head and messed with my performances. And but now, being as seasoned as I am and gone through the adversity that I have in my career and in fights in general, I don't think that there's anything you can throw at me that I haven't seen or dealt with yet.
That's awesome to hear, because I know, like, I haven't seen enough of him because Ring of Combat's on like what looks like a Russian website when you go to watch their streams. It's not the most easily accessible option.
Yeah, I don't know.
Definitely easier to go to AC and watch them in person.
Yeah.
Um, but this time you're at Live Casino
Hmm.
in Philly. Great
Oh
venue,
no, we're at the Valley Forge Casino.
Valley Forge,
Yes,
not Live Casino. Do not go to Live. You would be very
Valley
disappointed.
Forge. Valley Forge.
Valley Forge Casino, another venue that Art of War has done shows at several times.
Yeah, I won the title there in September, and now I'm defending it there. So home turf for me.
So that works out. And it's streamed on StarFund.
Correct.
I think you buy it and they put, is it your full name, last name? What's the setup for you to get kickback?
I believe it's just when you purchase it, you select whoever's name you want.
Awesome. I know some places are doing like typing in words, which is
Yeah,
a way to screw the fighters out of money.
yeah, and the quality of the stream is solid, so it worked for me last time. And then once you buy it, you have it forever, as far as I know.
Awesome. And then I'll link all that below, and then people can either go to Valley Forge Casino, not Live Casino, or stream it on StarFund. Pass it to you. I know you usually have a shitload of sponsors, so I'll
Yeah,
give you time to kind of shout everyone out you need to shout out, and then
yeah.
we'll wrap it up.
Shout out to my guys. Norma's restaurant in Cherry Hill, Mediterranean food, some of the best in business. Shout out to Albee Honey Farms. My friend and training partner Eugene Aubrey, his father runs he has his own beehive, and he makes his own honey. Primal Nutrition in South Jersey. Shout out to everyone else that sponsored me before. Dynasty MMA Clothing. And without the sponsors that I have, it would be very difficult to do what I'm doing at this age still.
And then December 15th, starfund.app, I believe. Valley Forge Casino. If you're too lazy, check Instagram afterwards.
Check my social media or Google it. It's just Google StarFund Ryan Cafaro and you'll find it.
Like I said, I'll link everything below, but I want to thank you for your time and best of skill next week.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.